Let's learn how to manage keyframes in the animation editor. The animation editor is going to be your best friend when it comes time to polish animation because we're given so much control over the animation's behavior in that editor. To access it, we can go to View, Animation, and you'll find it right at the top, and the hotkey is 0. Alright, so at this point we can select our ship and go ahead and load it in by clicking on refresh. That's if the panel has been locked down. Let's make sure it's locked, so just in case we go in and select another object, we're only still viewing the keyframes of the object we've loaded in. Alright, now depending on what you see, you may see curves, you may not see curves. If you don't see any, feel free to press the F key to frame all F curves. We have an idea of what these F curves are. They're how the animation transitions or interpolates from keyframe to keyframe. But where are the keys? Where are those dots? Well, if we were to select the F curve, now we can see the keyframes tied to the curve. Another way to see them without selecting the F curve is under the View menu. Simply choose View, Keys on Unselected Curves. I like to work with this on. So we always have an idea of where our keys are in time. Also under the View menu, you can set how each F curve is viewed in the editor. So right now, we're viewing all F curves, of course. What if we only wanted to view F curves of selected parameters? Well, in that case, we'd go to View and switch to Selected Parameters. There's the hotkey 9. So if we were to go ahead and select that, notice everything's blank until we go through and select a parameter. So chances are you'll toggle between 7, which is what we had before, animated parameters, and 9, which is only viewing selected parameters. Alright, great. Let's go ahead and start to move these keys around. So we can go to our Rotate Z, we can go ahead and select one of the keys and use the left mouse button to drag the key around and start to move it around. You can see as we move it around, looking at the timeline, it's also been updated there. Another way to move our key is by using the middle mouse button. The difference between the left mouse and middle mouse button is that with the left mouse, we'll have to be directly on top of the key. With the middle mouse, we do not need to be. That does not need to be the case. Also, with the key selected, we're given specific values of the key, what frame it lands on, and also the value of that key. So we could always edit this. Let's say if we wanted to bring this key back to 15, well, it's just a matter of going to our frame field and typing in that value. If we wanted to take the value of this key and set it to, let's say, a value of 2, we can go ahead and go to the value field, type that in. Okay, great. So that's going to bring it back to where it was before. And there are also like simple expressions you can put in as well. For instance, you can put in +2, hit enter, and now what's going to happen is your key is going to move to, or excuse me, if we were to put in +2 after the value and hit enter, notice that key is going to be moved to frame 17 simply because we added that value by 2, which is really neat. Okay, great. So we learned how to move keyframes. We can also, of course, copy and paste keys. I really like working with the copy and paste keys tool in the animation editor because it's really straightforward. All you need to do is select the key you like to copy, press Ctrl+C, go to the frame you like to paste, let's say frame 24, Ctrl+V, and you get the same exact keyframe. Again, right to the point. To remove the keyframe, it's just a matter of selecting it and pressing the Delete key. What we also find are these slope handles tied to each keyframe. Now this is really neat also because we can use these slope handles to change the animation's behavior without having to add any extra keyframes. So let's say if you blocked in your performance and you're ready to polish the animation, what you'd want to consider doing is removing keys and instead using your slope handles to get to the point that keyframe once was at. And if the slope handles aren't quite giving you the result you want, then you can go ahead and revert back to that keyframe. Also, a really neat feature, if we were to go to the view menu, is buffer curves. So watch this. If we were to turn on buffer curves and start to adjust our slope, notice we have an idea of where the F curve was originally. And under the edit menu, we can swap between our buffer curves. So let's say if we wanted to swap back to what we had before, we can choose swap buffer curve. If we want to swap again, under edit, we choose swap. And now if we want to save this buffer and get rid of the old, it's just a matter of going to edit and choosing save buffer. All right, great. What I'm going to do though, so we don't mess up our animation in the z-axis, is just undo back to where we were before. So we should have a frame value of 15 and a key value of 2. Okay, great. So we've learned how to work with a few tools that you'll be using often in the animation editor. I'd also like to show you interactive update. Let's go ahead and select the position Y parameter and grab the key on frame 31. So notice as we start to move this key, we don't see the update until after we have dropped the key. If you'd like to see that update on the fly, go to Edit and choose Interactive Update. Now, as we start to move that key, we see the change instantly. Also notice this. As we start to move our keys around, you can see that we're not quite on an integer frame. So our keys can lie between frames. When starting out an animation, it might get confusing to work this way. So what we could do to avoid this is under the Edit menu, choose Auto Snap to Frames. Now when we start to move this key around, Softimage is automatically going to snap that key to whatever frame is closest by rounding out that value. Okay, so those are just a few other things I wanted to show you. I'll go ahead and undo back to where we were before. One thing we will change in this lesson, before we get to fixing that pause, it'll be much easier to fix the pause when we cycle the animation, so we'll take care of that in the next lesson. But one thing I like to show you is, or one thing I like to do before this lesson is over, is go ahead and adjust the pose on frame 1 and 17 of the position Y, just so that the ship falls a little bit lower. So to have that happen with our start and end key selected on our position Y, we can hold down Shift and drag, and that's going to lock our movement of the key to whatever direction we have specified. So for instance, if we were to hold down Shift and start to drag horizontally, notice we're only able to move horizontally, which is not a good idea in our case. So we'd want to go ahead and start to drag this down. Again, we want to hold down Shift, and I'll bring this to about a value of -1, just so that this value is mirrored with the frame value on 31. And again, if you want to use a specific value, you can most certainly use the value parameter. So we could always put in a value of 1 on 31, since it's very close to that. And on 1 and 61, we can grab both of these keys and put in -1. So now closing out the editor, if we were to hit play, here's that change. All right, great. So I like that a little bit better, having the ship fall lower. So let's stop the lesson here, and in the next lesson we will finish our animation idle by learning how to cycle animation in the animation editor.